Take My Life, Please is the 18th episode of the third season of Wings. This is directed by Ackerman, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it's a pretty good episode. I certainly enjoyed the concept, and the execution was not too bad either, but I will say the final scene just seemed flat. I feel like we needed another scene or some more comments from Helen, but I'll talk about that when we get there. It starts off with Brian flying Oliver north. That didn't actually mean anything to me. I had to do some Googling, but that seems like a pretty cool thing. And then Helen comes in and she's wearing a rather snazzy blazer for her job as a realtor. And then her boss comes in and fires her. And this is because she promised somebody who was buying a house that it came with something that it actually didn't. And her boss seemed very over the top about this. He basically said that because of that, he could lose his license. I know nothing about that industry, so maybe I'm wrong, but that seems very over the top, very dramatic. But nevertheless, Helen's lost that part of her career, and Antonio suggests that she takes a career test, an aptitude test, and this is what she does, and Antonio has the results, and he basically gathers everybody except Helen into the office and explains that the results are food service or music. Those are the industries in which Helen should work according to this career test. That may seem like good news because that's where her interests well, maybe the food service part isn't an interest, but it's certainly where she is. But that wouldn't give her a lot of opportunity to change things. So they decided to do something that I didn't agree with, but I was keen to see how it would play out. They decided to just rewrite that part of the test results, and they changed it to lawyer or stand-up comedian. And they kind of thought Helen would latch onto the lawyer part because once upon a time that was something she was interested in, but no, she latched onto the stand-up comedian part. And what I think is really interesting about this is that sometimes we just need to be told something to follow our dreams. Helen thought it could be a really interesting career, but until this test told her she could do it, obviously she thinks the test is genuine or the results are genuine, until somebody said, this could work for you, she never considered herself capable of taking that step. Now we find out that actually she's maybe not amazing at it, but I do think it's interesting with the episode suggesting, or at least with my reading of it, that there may be things that we either want to do, but nobody has said, oh, you should do this, so we don't feel like we can. Or maybe there are things that we don't know we could do until somebody tells us we can. And I think that anybody at a career crossroads will understand kind of this feeling. And it took me back to my childhood as well. We would do career aptitude tests at school, and sometimes the results were ridiculous. Sometimes they were pretty accurate to what our current dreams were at the time. So definitely nostalgic in that sense, but I think also very helpful. Also goes with saying that career aptitude tests definitely need to be taken with a pinch of salt. They're just meant to be ideas, suggestions, and a suggestion that Helen took very seriously. She put up comedy posters for her comedy debut. And Brian and Joe realise they can't let her go through with this, which isn't very supportive. I feel like if anybody said, I want to try stand-up, then I feel like don't discourage them, because also what's not funny to you might be funny to somebody else. I feel like stand-up's probably a very difficult industry to get into and be part of, and I feel like there are many, many people who give it a go, and what's the harm? What's the harm in letting Helen try? But Brian and Joe didn't think so, and they told her the truth. Honestly, I thought it would have taken longer for the truth to come out. That's not a complaint or anything, just an observation. And I do like the fact that even though they told her this, she was still determined to go through with it, because something had given her that push. And I like that. I like the fact that she didn't just immediately throw the towel in. She does a performance for Lowell. Lowell doesn't laugh, which I think is saying something, because Lowell seems to have a sense of humour that adapts well to a lot of different comedy styles. He finds a lot of different things funny. Not necessarily the case with Helen, which is a bit awkward. Brian suggests she gets a gimmick. And her gimmick, part of her act, could be her cello. I don't think that's funny, but comedy is subjective. And we go to the comedy performance, and there are a lot of different performers. And before Helen is on stage, somebody else goes on stage with a string instrument. They have her gimmick. Obviously, they didn't steal her gimmick. They didn't know about it. But of course, that meant that there was no way Helen could follow that. And honestly, that's kind of where we end things. It felt just a little bit flat at the end. Like we needed another scene, or maybe, well, I don't necessarily think that scene should have been longer, as I think we got everything out of it that we were going to. But it felt unfinished. It ended, and I kind of thought, well, I need something more. I need a conclusion that's a little bit more satisfying. Not necessarily because things worked out or anything, but I needed something more conclusive. But nevertheless, it was still an enjoyable episode. I love the idea of seeing somebody chasing her dreams, even if she didn't know it was a dream until the aptitude test suggested it might be. And I rather like that a lot. I also love that she didn't quit. When Brian and Joe told her that they'd manipulated the test results or rewritten the test results. So some really positive takeaways from this, and also, as I said, quite nostalgic for career tests we did at school. They were always good fun, but sometimes the results were laughable. Not sure how reliable they are, but if it gives somebody an idea or a suggestion of what they might like to do, that's not a bad thing at all. Take My Life, Please is definitely a good episode. It's not perfect, but ultimately it's still an enjoyable episode of Wings.